Okay, everyone, this is Moment of Power number three, the most buttery of them all. The moment you create the right context to coach. This, of course, is Unit 3, Moment of Power number three, Week 3. Ding dong, can't get any better than that. So, what's this about? This is about the idea that what you do before coaching may be as important as the coaching itself, creating the right context, understanding the psychological context in which you coach, building a coaching culture. I've kind of said coaching in inverted commas there because it's not necessarily a coaching culture, but a culture that is conducive um, to coaching, and then understanding how coaching connects with employee engagement in particular, and singularly, if that's how you say it, singularly, whatever. We're looking at Daniel Pink's work and drive, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and there is a video for you to watch. That's one of the most famous books and famous TED Talks of all time. But we're going to do that next week. But you can do it this week if you want. It's your choice. You are totally in control. Um, so anyway, the this obviously connects with one of the moments of power that we did in marketing. Did anyone notice that? Moment of power number one was the power of context, and now obviously we're slipstreaming this into coaching, because the same principle applies. How you frame coaching and the information you provide about coaching and the culture that you create before coaching drives the success of coaching. Obviously, you still need to have great coaching sessions and turn up and be authentic and follow up and measure the success of your coaching, but creating the right context before coaching can change everything. So, in the book, at the beginning of Moment of Power number three, is a little diagram, black and white, to save some money. And basically, this kind of sums up the rest of the book, which is so really, as you know, Moment of Power number one was really what we did in the residency about understanding the power of coaching and that many people don't coach, which gives it even more power. And we looked at this in the TELUS context, and then we also did system coaching, have how to build a strong system for coaching, and again looked at that in the TELUS scenario, and really loved the WebEx that we talked about there. And now, so really, the rest of the chapters 3 to 8 are really about the coaching itself. So the first bit, which is the middle of the diagram, is about creating the right context, and then as we talked about on the residency, the idea that at the end of the day, coaching is a fantastic vehicle to provide high quality feedback. There are other ways of providing high quality feedback, but coaching is a systematic way. And I think, as we discussed in the residency, and Dan made the great point that, if you are coaching and providing high quality feedback, then feedback outside of coaching can be received in the right way. And I think that was a big part of the conversation we had on WebEx, right? When people use language like, this is a coaching opportunity, it's seen as a negative scenario for the person receiving it because there isn't any other coaching going on. So when you are providing feedback outside of a regular coaching a program, then it can be taken the wrong way. So chapter 4, Moment of Power number 4, looks at the importance of high quality feedback. Then chapter number 5 is actually links very strongly again to Moment of Power 2 that we did in marketing, which is the power of expertise. At the end of the day, this is about creating high performing employees who are experts, and there is a fantastic science behind expertise that we're going to tackle. I'm very excited about that. One of my favorite parts. They're all my favorite parts. Um, and then we're going to look at using an athletic approach to coaching and tapping into some of the research that I've done in terms of the gaps that exist between organizational coaching and athletic approach coaching. That's chapter number 6, or Moment of Power number 6. And then 7 or 8. 7 is about using fair process and providing a framework for coaching. And then 8 is measuring higher performance. Are we actually using coaching for higher performance? So there you go. Moments of Power 3 to 8 in one simple diagram that you can share with your children at the dinner table tomorrow, please. Okay, so the first part. So three parts to managing the context for coaching. Part one is understanding the psychological context in which you work. And I'm going to introduce two pieces of work here, both of which you may be very familiar or may not. You certainly will be by the end of Moment of Power number three. The first is where lots of people have done this work, but in particular, um, Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Economics Prize for prospect theory, and written the most fantastic book, definitely in my top 10 books of all time, Thinking Fast and Slow. And again, I think I touched on this a little bit in the marketing when we did some of the marketing pieces. Um, but the But the idea that Daniel Kahneman presents in his book is that there are two systems to our thinking. System one is our fast, intuitive, emotional response to situations, and this leads us to jumping to conclusions. Obviously, if you're road rage is system number one, right? Someone cuts in front of you, and even though they didn't crash your car or upset you, or hurt you in any particular way, your system number one takes over, right? And you might make some various um, hand actions towards that driver. System number two is that slow, logical decision making, weighing up the pros and cons. This person cut in front of me in the road, but, does it matter? Was I hurt? Did it cause a crash? And so you just kind of let it go, right? And it doesn't upset you for the rest of the day. Um, System number one is 5 times more powerful than system number two. And so it takes over, and when we should be using system number two, we're using system number one. And again, I introduced this into the marketing, but the idea here is that when you're coaching someone and you say something that they don't agree with, or you provide feedback without the context of coaching, as we've talked about before, when there's a coaching opportunity, system number one might kick in. But essentially, what I want you to remember, there are two parts to our brain: system one and system two. And system number one can come out in coaching, and so we must always manage that. We want to ensure that both the coachee and the coach are engaged in system number two, where we're slowly, carefully thinking about why we're doing this coaching session, what are the goals, what are we trying to get out of it, and avoid those emotional situations. I introduced that to you, but I think the much more fun way of looking at it is the video that I've attached on Core Spaces, which is Steve Peters. Steve Peters is super famous for coaching the British cycling team to incredible success in the London Olympics and then the Rio Olympics, and then lots and lots of other sports teams and business people. And then he wrote a book called The Chimp Paradox, and basically, to a certain extent, he's saying system number one is the chimp, and the chimp is in control. The chimp rules our lives, and and the human part of our brain, which is really system number two, is the slow, thoughtful decision-making part of the brain, is crushed continually by the chimp. And his book, Chimp Paradox, which I read a couple of years ago, is basically about how you box the chimp in, right? The chimp will always be there. You can't kill it, but but you can certainly manage it and box it in. And that's what we want to do as both the coach and the coachee, is to manage our chimp. So if you're the coachee and the coach says something to you that you don't agree with, well, you manage that and you ask questions to clarify that feedback. And if you're the coach, recognizing that what you say to someone can bring the chimp out, and recognizing when the chimp does come out and how you need to manage that, is very powerful. Now, what Steve Peters talks about is the fact that the one way to manage the chimp is to fill the computer up with logical, careful thoughts. The computer's often filled with junk and gremlins, and we want to manage that. So again, let's go back to that road rage example. If you've taught yourself to box in the chimp when you're driving in Toronto and someone cuts in front of you, but if you've put in your computer, I will not overreact when someone cuts in front of me. Um, Unless they cause an accident, I'm safe, and people are always going to do this to me, and I'm ready for it. Then you can box your chimp in, right? You feed your chimp a few bananas, and it stays in there, right? But if you filled up your computer with junk, like people are terrible on the roads are getting worse, this is so dangerous, then obviously that can ruin your day. You might keep that anger with you all day and ruin your whole day, rather than letting it go by the human taking over, system number two taking over, and looking into the computer and saying, what do I do in this situation? How do I manage that? And that, of course, is how we need to manage coaching session. We feel the computer as both the coach and the coachee, with situations that we are ready for, that we've experienced before, so that we can manage that interaction so much more carefully. So if we're being coached and we hear something we don't like, then the computer is ready to ask questions and clarify and dig deeper, and think about the fact that this is not about me. This is about my behavior and my performance and work, and how can I take this feedback and grow, and how can I thank the coach. And if you're the coach, you're making sure that you're providing feedback in the right way, and in the right context, by using fair process, for example, to make sure that the coachee's chimp doesn't come out as well. So Steve Peters on the TED Talk does a much better job than I'm doing in explaining it, but I think it's a very powerful concept in terms of being a better coach and being a better coachee as well. Now, so along with the psychological concept of the chimp and the human, and system number one and system number two, is I provided you with a few other examples in the book. The one I just want to talk about a little bit more is self-serving bias, and the article that I gave you, that people often think they're great coaches but they aren't, is really great self-serving bias example. People who think they're great coaches aren't great coaches, and they overrate themselves, and then which means they're not going down the path of learning to be a better coach, and the people who are getting coached by them see them as low performers. So I gave you that little article because I think it's a great example of self-serving bias, and also a couple of other examples in the book. So I've done some work recently with two big companies, and one of them I asked, how would you rate the efficiency of your team on a 1 to 5 scale, and how would you rate the efficiency of yourself on a 1 to 5 scale? Um, and this scale here are just those people who rated 4 or 5 on that scale. So as you can see, 49% of people said my team is efficient, so either good or very good in terms of their efficiency, whereas on average, people rated themselves 75% on those categories. So 75% of people rated individually themselves as good or very good on their performance, but only 49% on their team. So a big discrepancy in terms of what you think your efficiency is versus the team. And also very, very similar, I was doing some work in an organization where we're introducing the value of ownership. And before we introduced it, we just asked people, how often do you think you take ownership? And again, these are just the raw numbers, not percentages. So as you can see, basically 107 people said that their team took ownership frequently or very frequently, whereas 156 people, so nearly 50% more, said that they took ownership frequently or very frequently. If you just look at the very frequently box, it's nearly triple the amount. Quite incredible, and that's self-serving bias in action. Um, what is the idea behind self-serving bias? Yeah, and why am I talking about it in the coaching context? Well, hopefully it's relatively obvious, right? A coachee in particular who thinks they're better than they are, they will not be open for feedback, right? Why are you telling me that I can be better at managing difficult conversations, or uh, running a great meeting, or finishing my work on time, or managing my superiors? I am good at that, right? So you've got to remember that people think they are better than they are, and you think you're better than you are, and the more you manage that, the better coach and coachee that you'll be. Finally, I talk about the psychological context of coaching. I talk about the power of progress. And we've done this so many times, and I'm not going to talk about it much more. But just remember 76% of people's best days at work, they feel like they're making progress, right? So if you can contrast people's performance from now to where they were before, you're really using the contrast effect to drive your ability to be a great coach as well. Okay, the second thing. Uh, so the second part, and I've got this very sexy table here full of about 3,000 words. The second part is to create a coaching culture. Now, as I said, it's not really creating a coaching culture, it's creating a culture that is conducive. And what I say in the book, there are really four parts to having a strong culture that will trigger more success. And I want you to think about, well, in my team, where are we with this, and maybe the broader, where's Tellus at with this? So first of all, alignment. The best and strongest cultures are where there is an alignment across teams, across different parts of the organization as a whole, as to where the organization is going. The more people are on board in terms of this is what we're trying to achieve, this is what we're trying to achieve together, the stronger the culture. Behavioral framework, and I think TELUS is a very tight behavioral framework. It's really your TELUS leadership philosophy, your values, your fair process. The more you have a behavioral framework, the more guidance there is for people in terms of how their behavior should play out in front of others and with customers. Communication. By far the number one cultural trait of a strong culture is transparent and open communication. And hopefully that comes clear in the book. And the more honest and transparent the communication, the more vulnerability and psychological safety you create. And then collaboration. When employees understand the importance of collaboration, they actively seek each other out. And obviously, from a coaching context, that means you might be more willing to listen to your coach and more willing to be coached and be a coach as well, because you know that coaching in of itself is collaboration. So in the book, I talk about how having strong alignment, a tight behavioral framework, strong communication, and positive collaboration can drive coaching forward. But also on the flip side, and I think this is a nice little twist, it can also do the reverse, right? Coaching can promote alignment. Okay, it can help people pull back and see the bigger picture, which we discussed last week, and so that people can understand how their work connects with their goals and organization goals. Coaching enables you to execute the TELUS leadership philosophy, the values of the organization. For example, you can teach people scenarios when they can play those values out. Communication, obviously, coaching is all about communication between the coach and the coachee. And as I say, there's no easy way to have continual dialogue between employees and potentially their peers or their superiors than through ongoing and continual communication. And then finally, coaching is collaboration in action. And when you get two people who continually help each other to grow, then obviously you're promoting collaboration. It creates that psychological safety and promotes clarity in terms of what we're trying to achieve together. So I think there's a very strong link between having the right culture and coaching, but also actively using coaching as the coach to drive your culture forward, and particularly driving collaboration, communication, implementing and executing your behavioral framework, and helping people pull back so they can see the alignment across their work, their team's work, other teams' work, and the organization's goals. So, there's a case in the book that I think of an organization that's doing a great job, Joey Restaurant case, and I think it's a great example of not having a coaching culture, then creating a coaching culture. I'd love you to read that case, which you've probably done already, and then get ready to discuss it in next week's forum. But obviously, it's part of the chapter and as part of this week's discussion, but hold off your thoughts, right? But I think I just wanted to highlight the fact that the Joey case is a great example coaching culture, and we'll talk about how you think Joey created that coaching culture, and how it's changed their culture in the organization overall based on the case. The last part is Daniel Pink's work, and again, there is a YouTube clip on his TED Talk, animated YouTube clip, and then I talk about it in a little in the book. Um, and again, I think this is really powerful. One of my goals of this book is not to introduce too many ideas, right? Let's take ideas that are out there already and steal them, and pretend they're mine, and use them as such. But this one I can't take credit for because it's too popular, so I have to give credit for this one. And so Daniel Pink's book Drive, which I'm sure a lot of you have read, he basically introduces the idea that's the YouTube. I'll let you watch that. That they're purpose, autonomy, and mastery. Purpose is, that higher purpose that we want to work for an organization that is bigger and more important than ourselves, right? And feel like we're contributing. And again, I think Tellus has done such a credible job in the community perspective. The autonomy, people want to be self-directed. They don't want to. They don't want to be micromanaged and someone breathing down their neck. And mastery, the urge to make progress and get better. And that's what coaching's all about, isn't it? To help people make progress and to achieve mastery. So I think the fit with coaching is incredible. Coaching can help promote purpose, right? Why are we here? How does your work connect? That alignment piece that we've just talked about. It can also create autonomy by upskilling people so that they can work it out for themselves, and they don't need to be micromanaged, and they can take responsibility and autonomy for their own work, and they feel more empowered because of that. And of course, coaching obviously can create mastery. So I'm not going to talk about this much more. Daniel Pink does a really fun job in his TED Talk. The idea that the organizations we want to work for are the ones that create a sense of purpose, and that purpose enables them to be successful in terms of profitability, not driving for profitability itself. And again, autonomy is purpose. Autonomy and mastery is not too far from tight, loose, tight, is it? And autonomy is really the loose part in the tight, loose, tight. And then mastery, as I said, is all about coaching. But it's that growth mindset, having that growth mindset about I need to grow, I want to grow. But it's painful, right? And it should be painful. And we're going to talk about that a lot when we get to moment of power number 5. So there you go. Boom! Moment of power number 3, the moment where you create the right context. You understand the psychological context, and you manage your chimp. You feed your chimp bananas, put it in a box, give it some butter, cover the chimp in butter, and everyone is happy. Then at the end of the day, it's all about practice, right? And we're going to talk a lot more about practice. And so I want you to try the Janet and Chen case. Not this week, next week. I'm going to post the Janet and Chen case, where again I want you to use the feedback model to practice coaching. This course is all about you continually practicing, and we're getting you to do that with your coach and the coachee. But the more we can practice that using the Janet and Chen case, the better off we are. The idea again is that the more we practice being a coach and a coachee, the better off we're going to be. And again, 3 parts to coaching: understand their psychological context, creating the right culture, and understanding the drivers of employee engagement and how they connect with coaching. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. It spells AMP, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. It spells PAM, purpose, autonomy, mastery, or it spells MAP, mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So you can create any acronym you feel like, and so there you go. I'm empowering you to do that. So there you go. A ding dong. I hope you've enjoyed moment of power number 3. I hope you enjoyed the funny story in the book. Maybe it's not funny at all. I don't know. Maybe I'm losing my touch. You can tell me that. See you very soon. I'm off to Guatemala right now to teach for TELUS International. I'll bring you all back a piece of Guatemalan cake, which I hear is very nice.